Is it me, or am I getting slightly bombarded with these godforsaken new releases yet? Like, can we please stop getting introduced to new shit and just take a second to embellish what we have? Like, we have 2 new factions, an ungodly amount of obscure nobody characters being used in the same basic bitch skeleton that we've seen about 8 times already, and oddly enough, the obscure repaints seem to be a better use of the mold than the actual intended use. Like, you can't take one look at Spinister and Motorstorm and say Spinister's a cooler use of the mold. A good majority of these figures were set within the infamous Generation Selects line, the super fun to find figures that sell out from scalper bots and are never ever accessible on any mainstream market. And that brings us to one of the figures that started this trend from the Power of the Primes line, back when there wasn't 100 joints in every goddamn figure and there was still a semblance of an attempt to hide the hollow bits of the figures. One of the molds that's been dragged through the mud is the Power of the Primes Jazz mold, with its infamously terrible build quality and crappy unable to tab in correctly combined modes. It kinda sucks that this was our definitive Jazz of that line. But lo and behold, Studio Series is releasing a budget goddamn masterpiece, and the conglomerated nonsense that's a mix of Studio Series and Kingdom, not at all confusing the fan based on what in Christ's name the intended purpose of either line is supposed to be. And today is none other than Power of the Primes Ricochet. This thing is one of those extremely fun to find Generation Selects exclusives that come in a shoebox with some drippity drop Autobot full paint logos and combiner hand. Yes, this guy does have a combine mode, but that's not what we're here for today. This vehicle mode feels like the most transformery vehicle I've ever seen in my life. Like, it's both a car that feels unattainable and pretentious, and extremely utilitarian at the same time. From his gorgeously painted golden winged Autobot logo and his sexy as frig black glossy paint scheme, with his very G2 flames and honey mustard yellow highlights. Oh yes, I get it. We can't have gold paint because we can't have nice things in this line. Like, it's not that bad, but it feels like it's a shade or two not metallic enough. And it's not like this figure is some pretentious collector exclusive that's now impossible to find on any aftermarket. The rims of this car are painted in the same honey mustard yellow which the rest of the car is painted in, which actually brings the car mode to life. On the other hand, this car mode's an extremely compact piece, but hear me out here. Why in the shit of shit can we never get a freebie rolling vehicle, for God's sake? A 3-tired Hot Wheels car and a friggin' loot rolls better than this thing. It sounds like nitpicking until you try doing it in stop motion, and then the thing just looks like it's grinding against the frickin' floor. Other than that, this car mode is awesome for the most part, and since it has a combiner gimmick, there's a 5mm port in the back, meaning that you can have the unlimited blast-off fuckery, and you can go supersonic racing this thing down your animation studio. I love the extended elongated curvature on this thing, giving it a distinct feel from the Reveal the Shield Jazz, which is my definitive Jazz. Hashtag Power of the Primes is hashtag not my Jazz. But cringy jokes aside, it feels like the ass end of the thing was kind of chopped off and feels kind of overly flat. This is for the combined gimmick, but if this is a sacrifice it has to make for this awesome of a car mode, then I guess whatever puts toothpaste on your toothbrush. The core mode isn't really something that you can grip onto that tightly without untabbing shit, because there's like 16 tabs that you can barely see what you're doing with any of them because of how compact it is. Other than that, this core mode is really good and chunky and all caps, and there's no part of this thing that's left visibly empty except for a small gap with the head. So let's take a look at this robot mode. God, I love when the highlight color of a robot mode comes out from underneath the vehicle mode, completely invisible, and changes the color palette of the robot. I think this thing was intended to be Ricochet from the beginning, but they decided to make it Jazz too, because reasons, I guess. That's why the arms are all basically planks that fold underneath the car mode, and that's why the wrists are stupidly fused onto the side doors, making the wrist rotation null and void. The transformation design on this thing is fun, really interesting for the most part, and it feels like the most transformer transformation of all time, if that makes any kind of sense. It's a series of accordion hinges and folding clip-me-doos and whatever the hell else in to form a super cool 1980s cheesemo robot guy. The way the thing's designed in conclusion is good for the most part, but there were some aggressively stupid decisions made on the robot mode as well. The leg panels during transformation open up to allow the legs to accordion out, but they open in towards each other, which gives them no clearance to move, so everything clashes into each other. The panels on the outside of the legs are made of craptastic plastic that's fragile as frig, and the friction pins have already started to chip away on my copy. The entire upper and lower half of the robot mode is not only not pinned together, but it's only being held on by friction made of clear goddamn plastic on the windscreen, which is a notoriously horrible design choice. The wrists are supposed to be able to swivel, and there's even a mushroom peg to prove it, attaching them, but the hands are fused to the door of the car, making this completely pointless and a waste of parts count. Other than that, hot damn what a Chad. This robot mode feels like it's got that Neutron style. It has that Chad older brother of Jazz vibe figured to it, I guess. Does this strip make any fucking sense? His head sculpt is awesome for the most part, but I can't tell if they were trying to add a mouth here or not. It's so muted and piss poor that I can't even tell what it is. It's a nub, a dent, I guess. I don't know. They're both sleek and chunky and strong proportions of this guy, making him look both jacked and like a ninja at the same time. His car hood keeps its flaming double D car tits, and it looks badass. The Honey Mustard Fool's Gold paint scheme, in my opinion, is a little bit of a mixed bag. It's agonizingly almost great, but it feels like a shade or too light or not metallic enough. The shin vents on the bottom are amazingly sculpted, and thank Christ for this, there's no visible chunks of hollowness in this robot mode whatsoever, aside from, like, the inside of the arm, I guess. So with absolutely no hollow bits, his articulation must have suffered. He has a ball-jointed head, his shoulders rotate and move up, bicep rotation and bend, waist rotation, universal hips, and knee bend. Having no ankle toe makes this guy not as stable as he could be, and I feel the knee joints were given a smidge bit too much wiggle room on this thing. But the articulation is pretty good for the most part. His shoulders do get weirdly stuck sometimes because of the weird hinge system that they're attached to. Like, it's a separate swivel and a separate outward movement, so it clashes against the backpack and makes it kind of look like it's going to wind up chipping the windscreen or cracking it. The hinge also feels very fragile and off-putting in my opinion, so this is probably something you're going to want to look out for. In accessory news, he comes with his Generation 1 Jazz Blaster that looks about as standard default Transformers weapon as it can, which I definitely admire in a man. He also comes with the Prime Master armor, which looks really fucking stupid anywhere you put it, but it can be used as a standard issue default combiner hand because everything in the Prime Wars trilogy had a stupid gimmick that was holding it back. Power of the Prime's Pickle Ricochet is an awesome little Autobot with some aggressively stupid design choices that drag the figure down. While the transformation is slick as shit and a ton of fun and extremely addicting to do, if they'd slightly improved the build quality and made the wrists actually freely move instead of fusing them to the door handle, this thing would be a really cool bot. In my opinion, he's a very respectable 8 out of 10 solely because of his paint scheme, novelty, fun, articulation, transformation, and big dick energy. This has been the Stop Motion Fueled Hyperactive Lunatic Stop Motion Reviewer with his review on Power of the Prime's Pickle Ricochet. He's on Amazon for a not stupid price for a change, so if you're a fan, pick him up. This is Power of the Prime's Pickle Rick. Pickle Rick. I quit.